I'm really happy to have Andrew Folkler here today with me. He's been involved in the parental alienation movement, not as a targeted parent, but actually as a child of a parental alienation situation. So, Andrew, tell me a little bit about your background story.
So my parents divorced when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I was really young at the time, and like many kids, didn't really understand what was going on, didn't understand why mom and dad can't be together. And it was a very messy divorce in the sense where my mother was from Malaysia, and she was more of a homemaker, and she didn't really have any source of income. And so taking care of us, and by us, I mean myself and my younger brother, William, it wasn't feasible for her. And so naturally, custody fell towards my dad's side. And once my stepmother entered the picture, that is when the alienation process started. My dad was off trying to grow himself professionally speaking. He was in the budding parts of his IT career. And because my stepmother at the time was a early childhood curriculum specialist, having your children in the hands of an educator seemed like the right thing to do, and that's what my dad defaulted to. And so as a result, that's when the alienation process started. It started off with insults towards my mother, a lot of bad mouthing, a lot of you could say gaslighting. Even for a child, when you don't quite understand the intricacies of divorce, you don't understand the intricacies of romance and how a fading romance can impact a relationship, or how infidelity can impact a relationship. It's too easy for a 5 or 6 year old and a 4-year-old to really be able to dial in on what exactly is going on. And being fed a certain narrative by my stepmother is what resulted in us slowly wanting to avoid spending time with our mother, to ultimately rejecting her entirely, and then completely replacing her with our stepmother. And that would continue on for well over 12 and a half years, close to 13 actually, where it wasn't until my father was divorcing my stepmother that is when certain things started to become more noticeable to me, in the sense that as a 17-year-old, I was starting to see that she was trying to employ these same tactics to estrange me from my own father. And I'm fairly good at pattern recognition, and I knew that being a bystander early on wasn't going to be the right thing for me. And so that's why I took a very active role, you could say, in my dad and my stepmother's divorce, which resulted in me getting a better, and you could say clearer idea of what was going on both sides, because both sides were going to tell me very different stories. And in doing so, as part of that process, I unblocked my mother from Facebook. And like Providence, the day after, she sends me a Facebook message asking me, "Hey, how are you doing? I haven't heard from you in a long time. I hope you are well, and I miss you." And so that's what led to a more inquisitive part of me, that there was an entire side of her story that I was completely oblivious to, an entire side of the story that my father, who in his, you could say, obliviousness, enabled my stepmother. I had to learn to work through that kind of trauma and work through the frustrations of the past, the frustrations of your parents not being perfect, and learning how to best navigate and move forward in my relationship with my mother.
Okay, very interesting. So it was a process then of going from being estranged to then understanding that you were being alienated. It wasn't like a sudden light bulb went off then.
When you're in an abusive situation, or when you're in a situation where you're or maybe a partner or a parent or anyone who is just outright hurtful to you, whether that's emotional, physical, or any other forms of abuse, you mentally normalize that in your head. There's a lot of little little things that you accept because it's the only thing you can do. It's the only scope or perspective of life that you have available to you. And it's only when you exit that framework, and even more so talk to people about it, that's when you start to hear a different side of the coin of, no, that's not normal behavior. That's actually high conflict behavior. And it wasn't until a friend mentioned the term parental alienation, that's when we went down that huge rabbit hole.
So how do you separate, estrangement, where you may be upset because, you weren't treated well by your father, from alienation, where it's actually a little bit more active, where one parent's actually turning you against the other?
So alienation has a certain set of behaviors where it is actively polarizing the child against another person. And so some of those behaviors include things like bad mouthing the other parent, gaslighting, emotional abuse, playing the victim, a lot of things like that, where you're pretty much reshaping the narrative to pretty much harm the relationship between that person and the target.
In many cases of parental alienation, and I don't know if this happened in your particular case, but the children who are being alienated will do things to the targeted parent that they would normally not do. In most cases, it would be like ignoring them, not going for visits. But it can actually get to the point where they're spying on the targeted parent for the alienating parent, like behaviors that most normal people wouldn't do. And it just seems that for a child to have that kind of an extreme change from having a parent to actually treating that parent as if they were an enemy and spying on them and doing things like that. How can that possibly happen? It's just so many people I talk to are just bewildered that a child could actually come to that point.
Absolutely. And the best way I can put it is the child, once they have their life completely thrown in shambles, once they are in that position where primary custody is within the alienator's hands or the alienating parent's hands, that child is basically going to trigger into what I'm just going to call survival mode. They are going to find any means possible to ensure their emotional and physical well-being. And that can include being hurtful and adopting you could say, a shell of an identity similar to that of their alienating parent. The issue that I think many target parents have when they're in this process is they're addressing the anger, they're addressing the hurt within the child without realizing what's causing the hurt. And yes, it is the alienation itself that's causing the hurt, but all the stressors that are being applied onto this child simultaneously is going to result to them being in this constant state of anxiety and paranoia, worried that they're going to get in trouble again, or worse, be the target of blame or the target of verbal or even physical assault, because they know that if they don't abide by those strict two-dimensional rules, if they step 1 foot out of the box, they're in for a whole world of hurt. And so they have to pretty much abide by the rules like a slave would. And as a result of that, they know part of those rules is to not associate with the other parent, to not be in any way, shape, or form positive or endearing to the other parent. And if it gets to the point where, say, like you were saying, for example, like spying for the other parent or actively engaging in insults that a child would never make, for example, asking for child support, the child is doing that, again, out of survival mode, because they know if they act like their alienating parent, then they're bound to win favors for doing that. And winning favors is a lot better than being beaten with a stick. And so if you break it down in terms of carrots and sticks, they see you as a potential danger to their well-being. And the longer that carries on, the harder it is for them to detach themselves from the idea of, mom is dangerous or dad is dangerous. And as we know in marketing and even in propaganda, repetition is the greatest form of brainwashing. It's the greatest way of conveying an idea to a group of people. We see the same principles applied in the brainwashing elements. They're going to be telling that child that you're this horrible, awful person. And now the child isn't going to be old enough to quite understand how to qualify that, but they're going to look at their own experiences and say, okay, well, if my alienating parent is my default normal, how much worse is my targeted parent going to be? They're walking into your visitation expecting some sort of premeditated attack when there is none.
Right.
And so they're going to be jumping constantly, afraid of getting into an altercation, so much so that they might even goad you into one just to prove themselves right psychologically.
That sounds pretty horrific on especially on a child or even on a teen. Like, what are the impacts on a person's mental health? I mean, just trying to picture a child that's constantly in this high stress, high conflict. They're almost always in this, you said survival mode, like flight and fear mode, right?
Absolutely.
Over an extended period of time, what does that do to the alienated child?
Well, I can answer that question from my own experiences, and I can also answer it in the sense of some of the alienated children I've met. And there's varying extremities. There's one person I met who, unfortunately, is probably going to live the rest of her life in a high conflict situation, one way or another, either one of her own creation or getting into relationships with people who will continue to engage in high conflict situations.
So it becomes intergenerational, that it just repeats.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's like the worst case scenario. That's like the saddest part. That's where, where it's not just the high conflict tendencies, but it leads to, you could say, mental disorders and other things like that, where now they just don't have the ability to adequately socialize with people without engaging in some sort of hurtful behavior, without being manipulative, without being selfish or anything like that, that you would turn on somebody you call your best friend in an instant, let alone call them your best friend in an instant. That can result in a lifetime of conflict, a lifetime of hurt, a lifetime of manipulation, both of being manipulated and manipulating other people. And like you said, it creates a cycle within their life and in the lives of any children that they have. So that would be one extreme example. I've met some kids who are just getting by. They're not as active in the movement as I am. They're not trying to find their own answers. They're just trying to move on. That would probably be the best example I would have would be my brother. He took his time to try and process all his feelings and everything. Then found a really nice young lady and got into a relationship with her. And now he's healing through that And then in my case, I found just kind of reflecting on my own experiences that the alienation has in fact impacted my perception of the world in some ways. As far as for example, there's varying beliefs on how you should trust people, but I've pretty much become somebody who is always trust people to act in accordance with their nature. Everything is clouded by that. And I have to learn to, in a way, uncloud my experiences so that I'm not acting on these knee-jerk reactions. There's also an impact on relationships and how you build relationships. It really does depend on your personality as well. But in my case, like building relationships is something I do very slowly. I don't really open up that much. I'm a fairly keep the distance kind of guy. And that's something I have to kind of check in with myself and say, okay, am I withholding because out of fear? Am I withholding because I need to eventually learn how to better socialize with people. I need to learn how to find my place and find my sense of belonging, if you know what I mean. The same kinds of things that I would have had my family not broken up, or had they broken up amicably.
So it sounds like you need a lot, like, so children who have been alienated, so it affects their ability to maintain and even forge relationships, it sounds like, because of what they've seen. What other things should alienated children look for when they go for counseling? Like, what are they, they're sitting in front of a counselor. What are they, how can a counselor help them?
Well, a lot of that does depend on the experience of the counselor, because what the counselor is going to be dealing with is something totally different than what is usually brought up in their training, in the sense where it's the roots of the pain are built upon manipulation and brainwashing, and it's not that similar to abuse, because I've actually been told by numerous experts that abused children will still lean in favor of the abusive parent, simply because they build this idea in their head that, oh, well, it's not their fault, I deserve to be punished, kind of mentality. Whereas alienation has maybe that kind of mentality towards the alienating parent, but then a completely polarized, hateful opinion of the target parent. So having some sort of clear understanding would help the counselor in general. As far as what would help the client or the patient, there's a lot of small principles within psychology that can help them. And it's really not a matter of one secret sauce or one secret technique that will help them, but layers and layers of psychological principles that will help them. So as far as some of those principles that I could just rail off a few of them that really helped me, unconditional positive regard would be one. That was a concept put out by Carl Rogers. I mean, granted, this would help counselors help better relate to their clients as well. Unconditional positive regard is a complete acceptance of the person that you're talking to without engaging in any sense of judgments or biases that we carry internally. Ideally, this is what you want all your counselors to have of you, so that they can adequately help you assess your situation and help you, in a way, stand as a third person outside of yourself to look back within yourself. But unconditional positive regard was part of my healing, because I had to learn to accept what happened to me. I had to learn to accept that I was kept from my mother for 12 and a half years. I had to learn to accept that I said a lot of hurtful things to her over those 12 and a half years. And I had to accept that part of me still feels guilty about those things. And rather than reject my mother continuously in fear of that guilt, I chose to, one, accept that this is what happened and I have to own up to it. I have to find a way to rebuild a newer relationship with her, so that way I can find a way to grow within myself. The other side of unconditional positive regard is accepting the alienating stepmother. I had to accept the fact that this is a person who has lived most of their life believing that the world was against them, that the world was out to get them, and that included their family. I had to accept the fact that, this is somebody who is probably just deeply terrified of that fear of being inadequate, of not being good enough, and allowed those fears to dictate her life. And as part of that acceptance, I'm able to better, you could say, reconcile with the fact that this is what her behavior resulted in. And it has taught me a lot of things, but it doesn't have to define who I am. It doesn't have to define who I become. And it certainly doesn't have to make me in any shape or form a reproduction of her.
Interesting. So I'm not switch from the alienated child to the targeted parent. And I know when I talk to targeted parents, I often say, you know what, instead of spending $100,000 on a lawyer, spend a little bit of money getting counseling so that you can kind of be a better you, instead of being this really hurt, frustrated, angry, targeted parent. Because I don't think that's what the alienated child wants to see. How important is it for the targeted parent to kind of get some counseling so they can be more of a, more of a calm, like the antithesis of probably what the alienating parent is saying to the child, that your targeted parent's crazy, hysterical, and then the targeted parent is hysterical.
Yeah,
How important is it for that parent? Like you mentioned that when your mother called, it was like it sounded like it was a very calm first encounter.
it
How
absolutely
important is
was.
that?
I want to say that it is the most important thing in anything regarding parental alienation. Um, and as an example, there's a video I saw on YouTube where a 600-pound gorilla is charging at this guy. The man stands and looks the gorilla in the eyes, stands still and does not yield. He doesn't shout back, he doesn't yell back, he just stands still. And the gorilla stops in his tracks and is, beats his chest a little bit, but he runs away. I think this is a really powerful lesson in the sense of how we present ourselves. When we allow ourselves to be aggravated, when we allow ourselves to be angry or over emotional, we become unhinged. We say things that we don't mean. And what results in this is it creates you could say, a log of conflicts within the child's mind. The child's going to engage with you, realize, oh, well, I guess they are somewhat somebody that I shouldn't be talking to because we just got into a fight. And maybe some time passes, they try again. Oh, well, it looks like they started another fight. And creating a history of fights, even if they're small and pale in comparison to the alienating parent, it doesn't matter. Once they have that history of fights, that's when the child starts to tell themselves that everything that they've been told is true, and that they should just let go of the target parent, move on, and go no contact. And that's a lot of the struggles that most parents have, especially with the adult children of alienation who have moved out of the alienating parent's home and now are building their own families, and they're being now subsequently alienated from their grandchildren, is that these parents had unfortunately let themselves be emotionally vulnerable in front of their children. And it resulted in them getting into heated emotional conflicts, which resulted into a series of conflicts, which then results into complete no contact. And which is why whenever I talk to any parent, whenever I'm doing like a consultation, I always tell them that your emotional center is one of the most important things. It's kind of like, if when you're in an airplane, you put your mask on first before you put your mask on to your child when the air oxygen mask come down. Not because that your child's life is less important. That's not the point. The point is you can't protect them if you can't protect you.
Absolutely.
And so that's the biggest mistake I see in the parental alienation community is they get so quickly goaded into these conflicts without knowing how to work through their emotions, without knowing how to present well. So that way it creates an opening for a more loving relationship. In context with my mother was very open and very patient and very understanding, even if I didn't call her often. And to be frank, I can't say I'm the best son. I don't call her as often as I would like to. But, sometimes with work or something like that, I might go some time without calling. And maybe she'll call me and tease me and be like, hey, why don't you call mommy? But it's not in any way aggressive. It's not in any way inviting a tense emotional conversation. But she's allowing me to come to her as often as I can, or as often as I emotionally need to. And that's the kind of environment that I encourage parents to create. During one of my interviews on my podcast, I had somebody give a really good example. She said it was like feeding the birds. You don't put the suet or the bird seed out there and like just stand outside and start shouting at the birds. Birds, why don't you come? Why? I've got all this great bird seed for you. Why don't you love me anymore? Because that's going to scare them away.
Yeah,
Put the bird seed.
it's almost like you can. I see a lot of parents; they're almost begging, or they seem so needy. I'm just
Yep.
thinking from the child's perspective, they probably don't want to get into that.
Absolutely. And so my last example, my last analogy is whenever I talk to parents about that sense of neediness, I say treat it like you're dating somebody. When you meet somebody new, um, if I walked up to a girl down the street and I said, "Hi, my name is Andrew. Let's get married," it's not going to pan out well for me. I'm not. She's not going to take me seriously. She doesn't want to have a relationship with me. Who is this guy? And that's going to be where parents are with their children. They're walking up to them saying, "Hi, why don't you talk to me anymore?" And they're like, "Well, why would I talk to you? I don't have any trust with you. I don't have any rapport built with you." And it's unfortunate because, yes, they had those things in the past, but if we're taking inventory of their current situation, they have effectively what you could say is a huge trust debt with the child. And so they're going to have to find ways to send meaningful messages, meaningful gifts that will ease that trust debt, so that way they can then start working towards the big ask. In terms of marketing, that's like you're getting all those what we call micro yeses before we ask for the big yes, which is the sale. So it's the same thing. You're going to be looking for very small yeses from your child. Maybe you send them like a message, "Hey, there's this new superhero show on Disney Plus, and I know you watch all of that stuff. Is it any good? Should I even check it out, or is it going to be boring?" What's the worst that'll happen? They're going to be like, either they'll ignore you or they'll say, "No, it's not that great," or "Yeah, it's all right." And then at least you have some sort of feedback from them, and then you can work off of that. "Oh, I watched the first couple episodes. It wasn't pretty bad."
Yeah.
And then from there you can work off of that, rather than saying, "Hey, do you want to come for lunch even though we haven't talked for 3 years?"
So just one last question. What words, you've given lots of advice actually for the targeted parent. Is there anything else that you would say to a parent that's been targeted? Because so many of them, I find they've lost hope. They're grieving for someone who's still alive. I mean, the amount of sadness I've seen in some of these people is incredible. Do you have any, if you had 30 seconds to talk to one of them, what would you say to them to encourage them?
I think that this journey starts within, and it's about building a life that you would feel happy with. And I know that part of that equation includes the children, and having the children as part of that life. But right now, that's not a thing. And so in order to best create that image, you can't let your life stop. And I admit I'm at fault for doing this too. I let my life come to a complete stop when I was estranged from my brother, and I was just very frustrated. I dropped out of college, just worked full-time retail, and I had nothing really going for me at the time. And it's okay to take a break from all of this. It's okay to take some time to focus on your own life and focus on the things that matter to you, whether that's community service or working with other individuals, or maybe even working with other youth. But the whole point of what I do is I try and help parents understand that they need to become the best version of themselves, so that that's what their children are seeing, and that's what will ultimately attract them to come back to you. Because like we said before, if you create an environment of negative emotional intensity and conflict, they're going to be repelled away. But if you are the fun mom or the fun dad who's out there helping, the local soccer team or whatever, if you are out there doing potlucks with your community, if you are out there as a church leader in your community, or wherever you are, whatever your beliefs or creed is, if you are out there building a life that people want to be attracted to and be drawn to, that will you could say, radiate the most positive energy outwards, and ultimately that would reach your child.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. This has been so informative, and I really thank you for your time. And I hope we can come back and do this again sometime.
Absolutely, David. I really appreciate it being invited.
Thank you so much.